Hello, how are you going? Good morning. Alrighty, so welcome. All right, so tell us about keeping the balance. So how did you start working in bronze?
Oh, I started working in bronze in 1996. I did a short workshop, a 6-week workshop, and learned how to make a very small bronze about this big, and that's when I fell in love with the process.
Wonderful. And this artwork specifically, keeping the balance. Can you tell me more about this one?
Keeping the balance, the inspiration for this particular sculpture came, well, originally I'd done a small maquette, and last year my husband died. He'd been sick for quite some time, and in 2020, the beginning of 2020, he was there was no more treatment for him, and I said to him, what would you like to do? You know, we couldn't go overseas because of COVID, and he said, I'd really like to help you make a life-size sculpture, actually work with you. So I said, well, what would you like to do? And he said, I think I'd like to make a life-sized sculpture of that small one you made. It was called Equilibrista, which is Italian for balance. And so we set about, I taught him to weld, and we made the frame together, and then he helped me put the clay on and did the plaster work for the moulding, and eventually we made this keeping the balance. And it was quite relevant because we were trying to keep the balance in our lives, whether, you know, to go overseas, whether to stay home and be with the family for this precious time. And so we decided to stay home and got down in the studio in February, March, and started working, and together we worked nighttime, daytime, and it was wonderful. We had 3 months working together. Lots of fun, lots of laughs, and I produced this sculpture with John Selp and entered it into Sculpture by the Sea, and was lucky to be chosen.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's really a very emotional time for you.
It has been an emotional time, yes, but it's been very good. I've had lots of support. Friends and people have come to support me. So in that way it's been good. Sort of bittersweet, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's a really beautiful story to hear, and yeah, to have that time together is really, really special. Yeah. All right. Can you tell me a bit more about your studio? So you have I've seen you spend a lot of time in Italy, but you also work in Australia. Whereabouts do you work in New South Wales?
I work in Victoria,
Yeah.
and underneath my house in what used to be an old tank room where we had our water tanks, and it's now my studio. It's in 2 sections. I do my wet work, the clay and all that sort of stuff, in one side, and then in the other side I prepare all my waxes and plaster in the other side. It's quite a process to actually make the sculpture.
And particularly making something that's life-size as well, takes a lot of time and expertise, but also the materials would be, something that you really have to invest in.
Well, the materials for me are not so much, because I have this wonderful storage of buckets of clay which actually get reused. So this the clay for this sculpture was actually used for the one I had in 2019 here, which was a pregnant mother with a baby, and in 2018 I had another one which was 3 little beach girls. So the clay just goes back in the bin, and you can use it and use it and use it. I've been using it for about 16 years. And the other materials are just reinforced steel for the armature, and then wax, which does get wasted. The wax gets wasted, but the foundry can reuse it, and the rest is done at the foundry where they make the bronze from my wax model.
Fantastic. So interesting to learn about that process. It's so involved in so many different processes to go through. Can you tell us just that straightforward step-by-step process to make it happen?
Well, yes, I can, but it's if I go into detail, it'll take us all day. But basically, I make a skeleton just of this reinforced steel rod, and then around that I put it onto a support somewhere with bolts. Bolt this so it's just like a skeleton, whatever shape you've got, and then I wire it, twist wire right around it, and that's going to help the clay stay on. And then I start applying the clay just in small amounts till it builds up until I reach the shape of the figure. And then the finer work comes after that, where I'm actually doing the details, the face and the eyes, the ears, the skin, just dealing with all the finer details at the end. And once I'm happy with that, the details, I then make a plaster mould. It's called a waste mould because I only like to make really one off. I don't like to make a series of sculptures. I prefer to have something unique. So to put the plaster mould on, I have to put a metal shims right around where it's going to be divided. The plaster cast goes on that, and then when that's set, it's all reinforced on the outside, and we split it open and pull it apart and take the clay out, and then I'm left with a negative plaster cast. And into the negative plaster cast I paint wax until it's about 4 millimeters thick. And once that's all done, all the pieces, possibly about up to 12 pieces, I'd have to cut it into many pieces. Then I'd break the plaster off the outside of the wax cast, and then I have these pieces of hollow wax which I then put together sort of like an Easter egg. So I end up with the same sculpture in wax, which is 4 millimeters thick, hollow, and I remake the whole sculpture again in wax and work on all the fine details, because when you take it out of the plaster it's obviously a bit messy. So once I've done that and refined all the details in the wax, that I build the whole sculpture up again, and then I take that to the foundry in Melbourne, the Meridian Foundry, who specialise in artwork, and they cut it up again and make it into, say, another 12 pieces. And at the foundry they put a sort of brick-like substance inside the wax, which is hollow, like a hollow leg, like that. They put a plaster brick substance inside, then they put pins into the wax, and on the outside they put the same brick substance on the outside, and it sets hard. So the wax is carefully in between these layers of brick plaster stuff. That then goes into a kiln, and the wax is heated and it melts out, leaving this tiny space. And it's called the lost wax method, because you lose the wax but you have the space where the bronze is poured. So it's a bit complicated, and that's a very easy description.
Yeah, fantastic.
And then the bronze is, the pieces are all welded back together when the bronze is poured, and it's cleaned up. It's called chasing the bronze because it has lots of imperfections on the surface. They have to chase all these imperfections back, sand it, and that took about 2 months for the bronze alone, and about 3 months for my work. So it's quite a long process, and that was fairly quick, really, a bit less than 6 months. But then, of course, we couldn't exhibit because of COVID in 2020, and then we couldn't exhibit in 2021. But my husband did get to see the bronze cast, so it was wonderful that he got to see that, but he didn't get to come here to the exhibition. So that's mainly the quick version of the process.
Yeah, thank you. That's it's very, very complicated. I've heard of lost wax with jewellery, but obviously that's a very, very tiny version.
Yeah, it's a slightly different process, but yeah, similar.
Alrighty, well, let's talk about Italy. I'm so excited. I've been reading about all of your travels overseas. So can you tell me how they came about, and how many years have you been going to Italy? Where do you go?
Well, the travel came about because my husband and I retired, and we decided we wanted to learn a language to keep our brains ticking over. So we decided we'd spend 12 months in Italy. to start with, and we did that. We didn't learn much Italian the first year, but I did learn to say a lot of nouns and things like bronze and wire and nails and plaster and all those words, because that's when I really started properly sculpting in 2004. And I made a bust of my husband because he was the closest model that I could find. And then I made a bust of an African woman from my head and a small angel. So that was the first year in Italy, and we just got lured back. You can't help it. You get lured back to this wonderful place, which is full of art and sculpture. It was fantastic. So we did go under the radar for the first few years. You're only supposed to stay 3 months, but we stayed a year the first time, and 4 months the second time, and 6 months the third time. And then Italy was getting a bit clever at computers by then, so we only stayed for the 3 months that's possible without getting a long-term visa. So we went for 16 years for 3 months every year, and I worked in a foundry in Florence. I had my little space in the foundry amongst these amazing artists who were really good mentors for me, and we became friends with the family and still are today. And then I started marble carving probably 8 years ago, and I managed to get a studio in Pietrasanta, which is in the marble carving countryside near Carrara, where Michelangelo I should say, got his marble, and it's beautiful marble, absolutely beautiful. So I sort of self-taught to do marble carving as well as making the bronzes.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Can I ask you about your future plans? Do you want to go back to Italy?
Well, yes, of course, I'd love to go back to Italy, but I'm too afraid to go on my own. Getting up here was enough to do on my own, driving up from Victoria. So I think one step at a time, and if I'm still fit, yes, I'd love to go back to Italy and do some more work. I've got a big family who will support me. I'm sure they'd all love to come to Italy if I take them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very moved by what you're saying. I guess it's so interesting to have, to be able to go there and fit into daily life as well. It's a really big part of it to, have your, you want to go into the studio and live, and so you get to really see how people live who are living there as well.
Yes, we were very, very, very lucky to find this beautiful family at the foundry and at the marble carving studio as well, and they took us under their wings and just treated us like family. We were at the dinners and the lunches, and they took us for trips alongside the work. But I often worked for 12 hours a day in the foundry. It was an amazing experience. I hope I can do it again.
Yeah, I absolutely hope so too. And if the results, are things like this, and moving into the future new artworks as well, I really do hope so. So that brings us to the end of our talk. So thank you so much, Sue. Thank you to our Auslan interpreter, and I hope everybody's able to get out and enjoy Keeping the Balance and all of the other artworks that are here at Sculptures by the Sea. So we'll be heading up back to Marks Park for 11:30 will be our next talk. So thank you so much.
And I'd like to just got it on. And the interpreter, thank you very much, and thanks to Sculpture by the Sea for making this possible for me. It's great, thank you.